Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video, we're talking about your unpopular witchcraft opinions. Now, a few weeks ago, I did the first half of this video, and I realised it was going to be massive if I didn't split it in two. So today we're back for part 2 of this chapter in Unpopular Witchcraft Opinions. Now, if you've been here for a while, you will likely know I've done a few episodes of this. I will leave the playlist linked in the description box if you do want to check those out. These videos are not designed to shame anyone for their opinions. It is simply about having a conversation about topics that are usually not spoken about. And you'll probably find that a lot of these opinions aren't actually that unpopular. It's simply that they aren't frequently spoken about in online witchcraft communities. So today, we're going to talk about it. If you have any unpopular witchcraft opinions that you have not seen in any of my previous videos, feel free to put it down in the comment section and your comment might be featured in one of my future videos. So with that being said, let's get on to the first opinion. Up first, we have one that is all about signs and symbols. This one says, when you ask for signs about a situation and get signs that tell you something you don't want to hear, things aren't going to improve in that situation if you just ignore them and keep doing whatever it was that wasn't working to begin with. If the universe gives you an answer, either take them or reevaluate what it is that you want from that situation. This one I completely agree with, and I've seen it so much on witchcraft Facebook groups, or if not witchcraft, then at least like pagan and spiritual Facebook groups. You'll have people that'll talk about a sign that they've received, and they'll be asking for interpretations of that sign, which if you've seen the last episode, you'll know that I don't necessarily think is a good idea because everyone is going to have a completely different interpretation of it. But either way, people will then give them an answer, and a lot of the time they will align, they'll be at least similar. And when the original poster doesn't get the answer that they wanted, they'll just post that exact same question on a different Facebook group until they get the answer that they're looking for. And in reality, what was the point in asking for that sign if you're not going to accept anything other than the answer you already wanted? And when it comes to spells and rituals, as well as deity and spirit work, we really need to be listening to the signs, and it doesn't just have to be signs and symbols in dreams or in day-to-day life. It can also be in tarot readings and divination as well. I'll always recommend that people, if they're unsure about a spell or ritual, do a divination reading beforehand to figure out whether the outcome of that spell is going to be what they're looking for. If you've already done that reading and it's saying, no, that spell's not going to work for this situation, if you then do it anyway, you can't complain about not getting the answers that you were looking for because you were literally warned that this spell is not suitable for the outcome that you were looking for. People do this so often with deities as well. They will ask for a sign from a deity that wants to work with them. And then when they ask about what that sign means, they will reach so hard to connect it to a deity that they want to work with, instead of a deity that they're actually getting the signs for. Which is why, especially when it comes to spirit and deity work, it's really useful to come at it from an open mind. Don't go in thinking, I must work with Athena, I have to work with Athena, I will not accept anything less. Because if you're opening yourself up to deity work, different deities are going to approach you, and it isn't necessarily going to be the deity that you are hoping for, but that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. If anything, the deity that you were hoping for might not actually benefit you as much as you think they would, and there are other better suited deities for you out there. And it always confuses me so much. If you're going to ask for a sign, listen to the sign. Otherwise, you're going to get to a point where your spirit, your guides, your guardians, your familiars, your servitors, whoever it is that you're working with, is just going to give up giving you signs, because if you're constantly asking for them and they're never listening to them, there's absolutely no point in you getting that sign in the first place. Next up, we have, you don't have to do actual spell work often to be a witch. You can do it when you feel called to do so, and that's fine. In fact, doing spell work just to do it daily, weekly, or monthly is harmful to the work. There's plenty of simple ways to bring the spirit, practice, and ritual into your life and continue to grow and learn as a practitioner. This one I completely agree with, and I think it comes back to the way witchcraft is perceived in social media. There is this performative aspect of it, where when we're seeing people perform witchcraft on a daily basis on social media platforms, individuals who don't have a social media presence feel the need to do that for themselves. And this is something that can really hinder magical practice, especially if you're performing workings that you don't really want or need simply to fill that daily, weekly, or monthly quota. Sometimes you can have what I consider to be the boy that cried wolf effect, especially when it comes to working with deities, spirits, and ancestors, in that if you're constantly asking for things that you don't really want or don't really need simply to fill that daily quota, when you do really need something, they might turn around and go, but why should we help you this time? You didn't care enough about any of the other things that we helped you with, so why is this one any different? And you can actually self-sabotage. Not only that, but if you are a beginner practitioner, doing lots of spells without any real emotional connection, energy, or purpose to them can really hinder your magical practice. If you have no desire for that outcome other than to prove that witchcraft is real, you're not likely to get much, if any, of a result because there's no energy and emotion that's gone into that working. The desire for evidence is not the same as desire for that outcome to manifest. And so a lot of the time, beginners are really, really excited to get into magical practice. They might have one spell that they put loads and loads of energy into, loads of emotion and drive. That was something they really wanted and they got a result. They then start doing dozens of spells. None of them are really something that they're wanting to do, but they want to get the practice in. And none of them manifest, and then they start second-guessing themselves, questioning whether witchcraft is real, whether magical practice is real, and they end up falling away from the practice. And it isn't because the practice itself is the problem. It's because they're trying to do a lot of workings simply because they feel like they should. A lot of people on social media will share their magical journey, myself included, but there are plenty of people out there who will do a lot of workings in a day, or they will make videos about the spells that they do in a day, and it's part of their social media presence, right? Is that magical practice. And while I don't think them posting it is in any way wrong, it's important that we see it for what it is. They are someone who talks about witchcraft on social media. Therefore, their practice online is going to be somewhat performative. All of these things might be things that they carry out in their day-to-day life, but it's likely not things that they do every single day, but it's what you see them do every single day because they'll probably bulk film and then post them over time. And it isn't necessarily that social media is bad, it's just that we need to start perceiving social media as being not entirely true to life. This is why I always try to be really open about how often I practice. I don't do daily, weekly, or even monthly spells unless I really need to. And any witchy week video that I've done is actually just 7 days in my magical practice. Not necessarily 7 consecutive days, just 7 days that I've put together in a video. People have loads of reasons as to why they can't practice every single day. It might be that they don't need something every single day. It might be because they're a carer for their children, for their partner, for their parents, for someone outside of the household. It might be because they have low energy, or perhaps they have disabilities that limit the amount that they're able to practice. Maybe they work 2 jobs or just 1 job and you're really tired. You don't need extenuating circumstances to not practice on a daily basis. That's just life. And it's important to remember here that there are lots of traditions, cultures, and magical practices that do carry out their magic every single day, multiple times a day. It's just that every individual is going to be different. And we can't compare ourselves to the witchcraft someone else carries out or the magical practice that we see on social media because it's not yours. I think that's the main takeaway from this, is that you practice when you need to practice. I've not done a spell in weeks and weeks and weeks because I've not needed to. I might talk to my servitors and talk to the spirits. I might do divination here or there as I need to, but I'm not trying to fill a quota for my magical practice. And maybe that's just because I've been practicing for quite a while now and I'm not super new to it. It's really easy to fall into the habit of doing a lot of workings when you're brand new. Maybe it's just that I'm a little bit further into it now and so I don't feel the need to do it so often. But you don't either unless you actively want to do that working. Don't feel any pressure to do more than you need to. The next unpopular opinion is 2 in 1, so let's start with the first half, which says, my unpopular opinion is when starting out in witchcraft, don't run headfirst into a belief system or deity worship. Just because you decide to become a witch doesn't mean that beliefs like Wicca is the right path. I believe that we are chosen to go down a path, but that being said, we still have the free will to follow it or not. This is something I'm sure many of us have experienced ourselves. I know I certainly have. Witchcraft and Wicca were often perceived for a really long time as being synonymous with one another. If you practiced witchcraft, you were a Wiccan, and if you were Wiccan, then you were also a witch. And it's only really in the last few years that we're seeing a really big distinction occurring between the two. So perhaps if you started witchcraft in the last 5 or 6 years, this isn't something you fell into, but certainly when I was starting out, the idea that Wicca and witchcraft were the same thing was so prevalent that I, among many others, just assumed that they were the same thing. And so I spent 8 years of my magical practice following a Wiccan tradition, when in reality that wasn't something that was calling out to me, it's just something that I felt like I had to do. And I think that's ultimately what this unpopular opinion is all about. It's not that any of these given paths is bad or lesser or not useful. It's simply that we need to be taking that time and taking that step back to make an active and informed decision, not simply following something because it seems like the right path. And I think that's why a lot of people will dissuade beginners from deity work. It isn't that deity work is an advanced or even an intermediate practice. Anyone can fall into deity work from the first day of your magical practice to the 100th year of your magical practice. It doesn't really matter. It's just about taking that time to figure out signs and symbols, to figure out how to meditate, to do dream work so that you can gain insight and information from any deities that are reaching out to you. And also so that you can make an informed decision. A lot of beginners will go into witchcraft with maybe a deep understanding of some deities, but not all. I know that the Percy Jackson series had a massive influence on how much people knew about Greek and Roman mythology. And so a lot of people will go in wanting to work with certain deities. Hecate is a really popular one that people will choose because they believe that they are so deeply ingrained within witchcraft everywhere that they are the perfect choice. And so they will devote themselves to a deity that they don't really know that much about, and they don't even know if that deity wants to work with them, and then they can ultimately end up trapped within that practice when they develop their practice further and realize, actually, this isn't quite for me. So it isn't that going into Wicca or going into deity worship straight away is bad, just make sure that you can make the right choice for you. Now, the other half of this opinion goes as follows. It says, the other thing is about Wicca. Not all Wiccans are witches, and not all witches are Wicca. Yes, and I don't even necessarily think that's an unpopular opinion anymore. Same with the majority of these. I think it's simply a different perspective. This one feeds back into those books I was talking about a minute ago, how at the start of my practice, every book that I could find from the library was just a book on Wicca, and they referred to Wicca and witchcraft as being one and the same, and if you were a Wiccan, you would refer to yourself as a witch. Now, it's important to bear in mind the context surrounding Wicca and how everything came to the forefront. Wicca became popular during a time when the Witchcraft Act in the British Isles was repealed and people could now actively practice witchcraft. It was no longer illegal. There was a lot of fear around witchcraft, especially because the term witch and witchcraft are reclaimed terms. They would originally have referred to someone who practiced malefic magic, and it was a term that was given to them by the community rather than a self-identified term. Witches were not liked and they were not nice, and you didn't want to be one, but after the witch trials, we began to see the word witch being reclaimed as someone who practiced magical arts. And so we now see modern practitioners using this term to describe themselves. This was a time where people were still very fearful of that past. And so as a result, a lot of the aspects of the craft that came before the Wiccan revival were kind of removed. They were set back. You have deities and spirits and belief systems that were completely left behind and replaced with what we see today. And with that came the desire for a different term, a term that didn't have the same negative connotations, and so the Wicca was essentially created. Now, this was a more modern adaptation on pre-existing witchcraft traditions, and so it's completely understandable why people would consider Wicca and witchcraft to be one and the same, because this was really the only aspect of witchcraft that people were learning about, especially everyday people who were not initiated, who were not part of these groups and didn't know any better. And a lot of the books that came out of this time period and much later, well into the 2000s, were also based in this idea that Wicca and witchcraft were one and the same. One was simply a modern twist based off pre-existing traditions that was more suitable for the modern audience. And then we began to realise that witchcraft actually has a much more convoluted history than that, and there's a lot that got left behind. You also have folk magic, which is based on adaptations of pre-existing magical traditions. You can also be a solitary practitioner without having to be initiated or even self-dedicated into a tradition like Wicca. And so we're seeing that witchcraft now is, if anything, learning from its history to develop its future. And there are so many different options now as aspects of witchcraft that you can practice that fall outside of Wicca. Wicca definitely has its place within the witchcraft community, a very significant one, and many of us today, myself included, would not be here talking about witchcraft or practicing it for ourselves without Wicca gaining in popularity all those years ago. If it wasn't for that, a lot of us wouldn't be witches today. However, the idea that witchcraft and Wicca are always one and the same is still sometimes perpetuated today, and it's important to remember that within Wicca, you have people who will practice the rites and the celebrations that are deeply ingrained with witchcraft as part of their Wiccan tradition, but they won't practice witchcraft outside of that. They will do the Esbat celebrations, the Sabbath celebrations, and that is it. There are other Wiccans who will practice witchcraft in the spells and rituals they carry out outside of those ceremonial times, and so they may consider themselves both a practitioner of witchcraft and Wiccan. And then you have people even further afield from Wicca who don't follow the Wiccan traditions, who are not followers or initiates of any specific tradition and are maybe eclectic witches, or maybe they're traditional witches or folk witches, and so they would not refer to themselves as Wiccans because they are not part of this specific traditions within Wicca. Honestly, this could be an entire video in and of itself, and maybe I'll have to do that in the future, but it is a really difficult one because a lot of these ideas are rooted in history that is still living memory. There are still people today who remember Gerald Gardner, who had conversations with him, who worked with Doreen Valiente, who remember all of these incredibly pivotal figures within witchcraft history, and so for them, it's not witchcraft history, it's witchcraft now, because they practice exactly as they did back then, and nothing has changed for them. Whereas for other people who maybe look at witchcraft from a different perspective, it appears to be very different. So I don't think it's necessarily that anyone is right or wrong. I think it's just different perspectives to look at witchcraft. And it ultimately depends on where your origins came from, how long you've been practicing, and the certain traditions that you're a part of. The next one is actually a super duper interesting one, and sort of along the same vein. This one says, the religious devil is not the same as the folkloric devil. Witches can work with the devil with powerful results. That does not make you a bad person or even a Satanist. A Satanist is a Satanist. Witches that work with the devil are witches that work with the devil. This one is very, very deep, and I'm probably going to have to deep dive into this in its own separate video, which I know is really annoying, but it's like a massive topic. The first thing I will say on this is that a lot of Satanists are actually atheists. They don't believe in the devil, they don't work with the devil. Of course, there are some religious Satanists, but when we're looking at groups such as the Satanic Temple, they're atheistic in nature, and they describe themselves as such. This is taken from the About section on their website. It reads, the mission of the Satanic Temple is to encourage benevolence and empathy, reject tyrannical authority, advocate practical common sense, oppose injustice, and undertake noble pursuits. They do have 7 tenets that they work by, and they go as follows. 1. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. 2. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. 3. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. 4. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's will. 5. Beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's belief. 6. People are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused. And finally, number 7, Every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. Now, while many Satanists are atheistic in belief, there are people out there who do have a more religious aspect to their practice and who may follow the Christian devil. But as mentioned in the original Unpopular Opinion, the Christian devil is not the same as the devil that we see in many aspects of witchcraft. Now, with this, it is important to note that because witchcraft is secular, you can add whatever religion or spirituality you choose to add to it, and so there are many people out there who do follow the Christian devil within their witchcraft. These people do not speak for everyone's magical practice, just as everyone else doesn't speak for them either. So to say that there is no Christian devil in the craft is not entirely accurate because it's up to individuals to decide what they choose to do. However, what we do see within witchcraft is a varying amount of different devil-type figures, and it's believed, though not definitive, that the Christian devil in the form of a horned creature actually came about later, and we have lots of these horned gods throughout the world, some of the most notable being Herne, Pan, and Keranos. These all sort of look like the devil, but they were pre-existing beliefs among individual peoples. And so a lot of people, myself included, who work with these figures may, at first glance, be accused of being devil worshippers, when in reality, I don't work with the Christian devil. Instead, I work with Keranos. And then, of course, we have traditional witchcraft, where we have the idea of the witch's devil, who is another devil-type figure, but is not the Christian devil that a lot of people would perceive him to be at face value. The presence of these horned god figures appears all around the world and often predates the belief in the Christian devil looking a certain way. We also have this type of figure as the horned god within Wicca, once again, not the Christian devil. And so I think it's really important when we're looking at this to not take anything at face value or to paint everyone with the same brush. It is very much variable depending on your tradition, your individual belief systems, and because witchcraft is so variable, no two people are going to practice the exact same thing. Next up, we have: you can't celebrate the witch holidays at your choice of time of year. Example, Northern and Southern Hemispheres. I live in Australia and witches still celebrate Samhain in October. All Sabbats have seasonal reasons to the traditions, so it makes no sense to celebrate them at the wrong seasonal correspondence. I know it's hard being in the Southern Hemisphere when we copy everything in the North, but we need to break down false teachings and honour the earth at the time it's at, not 6 months in time. Yeah, and it's why if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, it's typically recommended that you turn the wheel of the year by 6 months. So we have just had Samhain here in the Northern Hemisphere, but in the Southern Hemisphere, you will have just had Beltane. If it is Letha in the Northern Hemisphere, it would be Yule in the Southern Hemisphere. And this is because the celebrations included in the wheel of the year are primarily from Western Europe. And so they follow the harvest and the environmental seasons of that location. And this is why a lot of people find the wheel of the year doesn't work for them. I get a lot of comments on all of my seasonal videos, especially my Imbolc and Ostara videos, of people saying that it doesn't make any sense because they live in Alaska and the seasons just don't line up. And the seasons don't line up, and they won't line up, because the festivals that have been included in the Wheel of the Year, important to remember that the Wheel of the Year is not an ancient series of celebrations that have all been celebrated together. Instead, they are a collection of celebrations that have been adapted and then grouped together in a modern system for celebrating them. And so because of that, unless you are in the regions that these celebrations were originally taken from, and the timing of them is really significant, it's not going to line up to where you are. And so, if anything, adapt it. I'm not opposed to people adapting it, and actually I think it's better for you to adapt it. Otherwise the symbolism isn't going to make much sense. If you're looking at a harvest festival like Mabon, and then you're looking around you and you're thinking, well, it's nowhere near harvest season here, all of the meaning of that celebration is completely gone. If you're looking at a celebration like Ostara, all about that new growth, that renewal, that development and fresh starts, if you're looking out your window and realizing that you are still in the middle of winter and it's not going to get anywhere close to what Ostara is meant to be like for another 2 months, then that celebration is kind of pointless. So do change it and adapt it, because these celebrations are designed to be based and rooted in the seasonal behavior of the land. They are harvest festivals, they are land celebrations, and if those land celebrations don't make sense, then it's worth shuffling them around. And it's why I will often consider these celebrations to be seasons, because every year we are not necessarily going to be in the same place as we were the year before, because things change, the weather changes, temperatures change, and so I will adapt when I celebrate within a window so that I can make it align as best as I can. And I live in a place where the seasons and environment very much aligns with the original celebrations, and even I have to adapt them. So it's definitely worth shuffling them and even picking and choosing what works best depending on where you are. Not all celebrations are going to work. You will, however, find that a lot of places around the world will have really similar celebrations, and it's going to vary date depending on where you are and the seasonal shifts, but they'll often follow similar patterns. So harvest festivals are really, really common. Festivals to celebrate new growth, new beginnings are really, really common. They're not always going to fall on the same date, the same week, or even the same month, but it could be worth looking into your own location, your own region, to figure out if there are any local celebrations that you might want to follow in replacement to Wheel of the Year celebrations that simply don't line up. And if something doesn't work in your magical practice, you may as well not include it. Find something that works best for you. The last opinion is my opinion, and it might not be all that unpopular, but it's not something that I see that often spoken of, especially in books on the subject. And that is, don't put yourself in harm's way to carry something out by the book or by tradition. Now, I have a lot of books in my collection, and there are a good many that describe word for word the rituals that you need to carry out at certain times, on certain days, in certain locations, with certain items, and I'll go all the way through that book, and not once will it be mentioned that you can adapt anything in them. And while many of us who've been practicing for enough time will know, we can change and adapt workings, and while there's some core aspects that stay the same, there are other things that we can change and adapt. A beginner who's just got that book for the first time, and maybe it's the only book that they've got, is not going to realise that they can change and mix and match and do things to keep themselves safe. Sometimes we might change things because we don't have the ingredients, but the most important changes are the ones that stop us from being in harm's way. And it doesn't just have to be your harm, it could be the harm for people in your environment as well. If a working is saying that you need to burn a set number of candles on the floor, but you don't have any means of keeping those candles safe and stopping a fire from starting, then it's worth not including the candles, or just including a few that are going to be in safe candle holders. If you have pets, or perhaps you have asthma or allergies, if a working calls for burning incense, don't burn the incense. There are so many different techniques that you can go down that don't require putting yourself or the people or animals that you live with in harm's way simply for a working. The biggest aspect for me, though, is something that I see a lot of the time in books, especially those that focus more on traditional witchcraft. There is definitely a call for doing workings out in nature, and while that sounds like it would be an amazing thing, it's not always going to be safe to do so. If a working says that you have to be outside, really think about why that working needs to be outside. Unless there is a very set reason as to why that is, you can do it in your back garden if it's safe and enclosed to do so, or you can do it inside unless there's a very, very definitive reason. And even if there is a definitive reason, you might be able to adapt it, bring some of the outside in if it means keeping you safe. Some rituals call for being skyclad or naked in an outdoor environment whilst alone, and although that sounds like a witchy dream for some people, we live in a world where that isn't safe. Not for everyone and not everywhere. And so my biggest unpopular opinion, among some books that I've read anyway, is that adaptation is the key to a long-lasting magical practice. We do not need to be using people's workings word for word if it means we are not staying safe. So, with that all being said, I would love to know your unpopular witchcraft opinions. Do you have any that have not been featured in a video before? Feel free to let me know by putting them in the comment section. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to give it a like. It really means a lot to me. If you do have any questions or comments, feel free to post them down in the comment section. I have a full playlist of videos just like this that I will leave linked in the description box and also up here if anyone wants to check them out. And if you do enjoy the magical content in this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try to post magical content every single week. So with that being said, I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Okay. Oh, I moved it. Is that straight? I can't tell if that's straight or not. Well, the bonus is that you aren't straight. You're like at a funny angle. So like you won't notice anyway, only I will notice. Anyway, I'm procrastinating. Oh, meow, 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 meow. Am I okay? Oh, I think this might be a sign I've spent too long inside. Maybe I need to go outside and touch grass or something. Ah! I hit my finger on a box. I was planning on filming a separate video. I have a giant stack of... Oh, whoa, I nearly flung one of those into my face. I've got a giant stack of books that I was planning on doing as a second video. Completely did not realise that I talk way more than I think I do. I've already been filming for an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm halfway through the unpopular opinions. So I've had to split it and just do it as a separate video. The downside is intros are the hardest to do, and now I've got to do another intro. I hate intros. And honestly, it's making me wonder because quite a few of the people that I follow no longer do intros to their videos. Like if you didn't read the title and you just clicked on a video, you would have no idea what was going on. And I'm wondering if it's because other people hate intros as much as I do, and so now they just don't do them. I mean, it's an option. Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video, we're doing another Unpopular Opinions episode. This time, as with the previous ones, no pie. Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video, we're talking about your unpopular witchcraft opinions. That's it, that's all I need. I'm overcomplicating this. Just gotta stop procrastinating. I'm procrastinating. And I've gotta stop procrastinating. Okay. Oh, I said I was going to film another video today. I'm not sure I have the back strength, willpower. I'm not sure. I need to stand up for a minute because my butt is numb.